All right.
Yo!
Welcome to another brand new episode
What
of
up?
Wrestling with Life. It is back for 2026. This is episode 29, and we are super
Yeah.
excited today because we are going to be talking to Xenia of Xeniadidthat. And I'm
Yeah.
sure just seeing that social media tag and just hearing us say that,
Yeah.
I know you have to know, you have to have heard of that because
Yeah.
she is just all over the place. She has exploded all over the internet, just in wrestling and in media and all different types of things. So we are super excited to
Super
have
pumped.
her here today.
Yeah.
As always, I'm King Ralph. That's Parma Sean. And let's not waste any more time. Let's bring
Yeah.
her in. Hello, hello.
Oh, hi. Thank you guys for having me. What a great introduction.
Of course.
Hey, well, of course. I mean, I don't even know how else to say it because you're just everywhere, doing everything. So for our viewers who apparently live under a rock or in somewhere without the internet, why don't you just tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm mostly a strategic media development professional, but I'm also a content creator.
Mhm.
And throughout the 7 years that I've been working, anything and everything that has to do
Mhm.
with the camera and the microphone.
Yes.
So I've done sit-down interviews, run-gun interviews, backstage interviews. I've done short-form content, long-form content, blogging, unboxings, reviews, anything that you can imagine that has to do with wrestling involves a camera. I've probably done it at least once. I've also managed, I've also ring announced, I've hosted events, and I continue to do so. Even though lately I've been focusing more on my educator side of
Right.
things. But social media is now such an important part of my life, and
Yeah,
such an important
yeah.
part of how people found out about me. So it's something that I'm doing and I'll always do. And why I said this introduction I love so much because as someone who specializes in social media, this is the biggest compliment when you say you've definitely heard of her. Like that's the goal, right? The goal is to ring a bell. The goal
Right.
is not even for people to know everything about me or a lot about me or to even tap the follow button, right? The goal is to ring a bell, and we're ultimately all competing as creators or wrestlers or whatever else type of professional. We're competing for that one spot in someone's brain. So I very much take this as a compliment. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you said it yourself that you do interviews, and your very first interview was with Ultramantis Black. What do you
Yeah.
remember about that day? And were you nervous at all, or did you just kind of lock it in?
Oh my god, I was so nervous. I was proverbially shitting myself. Can I say that? Sorry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely.
But yeah, it was a crazy opportunity because I was living in Russia at the time, and that's
Right.
where I partially grew up. I grew up between mostly Russia and Spain. And Ultraman Black, before the political situation got really bad, he used to come to Russia a lot to wrestle, but also he has friends, and also there's a big punk/vegan community in Russia, so he has a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Good to know.
So yeah, so it was a very interesting opportunity because he's the legend of the American scene, of
Yeah.
the Philly scene, and the Chikara legend, and all of that. So to have that as my first interview, it was extremely nerve-wracking. It was my first time backstage at a wrestling show.
Yeah.
It was my first time doing any of that. So I was very much freaking out. I brought two friends with me to help. One of them is my best friend to this day, and she lives in Greece now, but she, was my childhood friend. And my other friend is actually now a commentator for that promotion that we were doing that at. But at the time, he was also just a fan. So I had a wrestling person with me and a non-wrestling person. And as wrestling people, you kind of know the etiquette, even if you've never been backstage before. You don't look at the run sheet. You kind of look away when someone is taking their mask off,
Right.
if they're still in the mask, right? Meanwhile, my non-wrestling friend is just staring. And it was funny because, if you can picture Ultramantis Black in your mind, that's like the most wrestler-looking wrestler ever, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we were preparing to start the interview. We were just about to start rolling. And my best friend was like, "Oh, this is the guy we're interviewing?" And I was like, "Yeah, the guy in the mantis mask, in gold pants, and with two full sleeves of tattoos is the wrestler that we're interviewing." I think it went pretty well, but yeah, it was definitely very, very nerve-wracking.
So, in contrast to that, one of your most recent interviews was with the former Damien Sandow, Aaron Haddad. So, tell us a little bit about that, because that's a very interesting interview.
Yeah, actually, Aaron is my business partner. We've been partnering recently.
Oh, wow.
Seminars and to do other appearances, and I've been helping him work on his social media presence as well. So that interview was a part of that, and I think it's one of my best work. I think it's one of the best interviews I've ever done, and obviously this is not only because of me, it's because of Aaron as well, because he's
Right.
such an interesting person to talk to, and I genuinely think he's one of the greatest wrestling minds alive right now. And the extent to which he I want to say helps, but helps is not even the word. I want to say carries without offending anyone else. Carries NWA on his shoulders right now in terms of the storytelling and the character work and helping young talent and mentoring them is just absolutely incredible. And for me to get to sit down with him like that when he hasn't really done any serious long form interviews since his WWE days, because he's always been a very reserved person. Like he's been on the podcast here and there, but no one had ever done a deep dive like we did, because we started all the way in his childhood, what his family was like, how he started wrestling, his first wrestling school, his first wrestling training. So it was just absolutely incredible to be able to unearth all of that and to be the first to do it even more so. But Aaron has been just absolutely wonderful to work with.
And
Absolutely.
it's so interesting to see that side of him, because you hit it very early on in the interview where, you know, he has not really been a very outward person. He's been a very private person as far as a lot of that stuff goes. But to see this side of him, as you said, you know, the wrestling mind and the business mind, it's incredible to see that different side of somebody that we know in a completely different context.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you call your style turnkey interviews, meaning no recycled dream match questions, real research every single time. How do you even start preparing for someone's you never sat down with before?
It's just a really deep like Google dive. Google their socials, their previous interviews, because I try to not ask the same question,
Sure.
unless I feel like I could, you know, reframe it or just go deeper on that. And I often ask people who are wrestlers very non-wrestling questions.
Right.
And we've ended up talking about the most outlandish stuff when I don't know things. And it's gone some good ways where we talk about rescue animals, and we've talked about their service. For example, I have an interview with Sean Dean, so we've talked about his time in the military. Or it can go a really bad way where I've definitely had conversations stir towards people, you know, denying climate change and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
But it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna unearth. But that's the job of an interviewer. Your job is to kind of like a surgeon, to cut them open.
Right.
And then whatever spills is what's inside. But it definitely helps, like you said, to be prepared to know what they like, what their hobbies are, what they do outside of wrestling, what they do differently in wrestling. Because that way I've had people talk about stuff that they don't get to talk about a lot, but they're excited to talk about it. My interview with Brian Cage is one of my favorite interviews, because he always gets typecast almost as the big guy monster heel or whatever, right? But we end up having a very deep conversation about the like logic and psychology of wrestling, the booking, the psychology and structure of matches, and he's just such an intelligent person in terms of everything but the business specifically. So you never know what's gonna come out, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So let's kind of take it back to the beginning here. Tell us about Xeniadidthat, and how did that all come about for you?
I think it was a very conscious decision for me that took a while, but then was taken pretty quickly to start creating content, because I have an education in media, and I've also been a wrestling fan since I was 11 years old. And it took me surprisingly long to put the two together and for it to click and for me to be like, oh, I could do something with that, you know?
Right.
And with the nickname, I remember, you know, sitting down with my notes app on my phone and kind of drafting up what it could be, because I didn't want it to be too wrestling, just in case I want to do more stuff, which I do now, right? But I also wanted it to reflect me and what I do, and turns out I just kind of do everything.
Nice.
So that's how it was born. But at this point, it's my name. Like people call my dad, call him like Father Did That and all this kind of stuff.
That's great.
So it's like it's something that's just so represents me that it's even weird for me to think that it's fairly new, which again, 7 years, I don't know how new that is in terms of social media. I guess it's
a pretty long time. I think it's a pretty long time.
Yeah, it's a pretty long time. Yeah.
Now, along those lines, you have a show called Did That Show, which is built as a show by women in wrestling for everyone. Was there a specific moment then where you just thought this needs to exist and nobody's doing it?
Yeah, it was a show I did with High Spots. And it premiered exclusively on High Spots, but now it's available on my YouTube channel as well. That's a deep cut. Like, that's a good question because it was a while ago too. I'm definitely open to do another season if any network is interested. But it was definitely a thought of, okay, one of the main things that I've been doing and accentuating in my work as a content creator is giving women a platform, giving women the time and the spotlight and the camera time, right? Because
Sure.
Still to this day, women don't get as much screen time as men do in any aspect of wrestling. And it was just a thought of how do I productize it? Like, how do I give it a format? And the format ended up being, we had one guest per episode and we had one topic per episode. So for example, episode 1 has Katie Forbes, whom I absolutely adore. She's just amazing. And the topic of the episode was objectification. So the guest was meant to have the experience with that problem and be able to talk about it from experience. So we ended up structuring it in a way where the guest talks about how they experience, and meanwhile we cut it with me giving like a theory on it, like a definition, for lack of a better word. So I think that made for a really cool format, maybe a little too serious for what a lot of wrestling community is used to, but I think, it's something that needs to be talked about.
Sure.
So, like I said, I'm very much open to doing more of that.
Now, along those lines, I mean, we do see more of women on mainstream wrestling TV these days. But what do you think wrestling gets wrong about representing women?
Oh man, that's such a that's a very big question. And a very complex question. I don't think there's one single answer to what we're getting wrong. And I also think it's not inherently a wrestling problem as much as it is a society problem. And wrestling, just like any art and any medium, reflects that and represents that. So it's really not that wrestling is this evil industry that's just solely misogynistic because of what it is like. No, not at all. But I think, answer number one is a boring answer, is time. And unfortunately, a very long time for people to get used to seeing more women with agency on their screens, because with wrestling, and just like with any other, again, sports and entertainment, we historically saw women as accessories. The same way we see women being, announcing rounds in boxing. That was the same way that women historically were used in wrestling, just in slightly different shapes and forms. So the mainstream viewer needs time to get used to seeing women having as much weight as characters and performers as men. But another one is it's definitely on the promotion to give the women that spotlight, because it becomes a wicked, vicious circle of, oh my God, I'm booking this show and I'm not going to put any women on it. But now that I'm going to put women on it, the fans are not interested because they don't know who these women are and they haven't had the time to get invested. So they walk out, they go to the bathroom, they go get snacks, or they buy less tickets. So therefore, I'm not going to book women again. It's a false logical conclusion, If you were to put a random man that they've never seen before on the show, they would walk out and go to the bathroom just the same way. So it's about investing that time, effort, and that thought into the storylines that women get to have, that women's wrestling gets to have. And also, and this is not to sound mean in any way, right? But for a lot of independent shows, the booking decisions are made not based off of the potential that a wrestler has, or the in-ring ability that the wrestler has, but on something else. Sometimes it can be the number of followers, which as a social media expert, I can't be mad at that, right?
Right.
Or a lot of the time it can be based on looks, which again, I can't blame the performers themselves for looking a certain way or presenting a certain way, because that's what markets, that's what sells, right? But I've seen independent promoters have like one women's match on the show, and it's this, for example, like blogger gamer girl who started wrestling yesterday, versus this girl who is definitely too green and not ready to wrestle, but that the trainer really, really likes, and they deliver a bad match. and then they point a finger and go like, see, women's wrestling sucks. But that's not how any of that works, you know? So that objectification lies not just with the fans, it lies with the promoters as well. And seeing women as performers with agency is the promoter's job as well, not just the fans. So it is a very complex issue, and I could go on, but you know, we don't have that much time.
Well, and so sticking with independent wrestling, because that's what we really cover on the Opinion City podcast. What do you think? Because women's wrestling in the independents is completely different than it is on mainstream TV. So what do you see more benefiting women's wrestling? Organizations that are featuring all women's wrestling, or organizations that have women wrestling, the same as any other wrestler, like an all-inclusive wrestling, male, female, whatever it may be, they all wrestle together?
I honestly think both. I think both are good in their own ways, because on the one hand, it's obviously very important to give women that time on mainstream regular promotions, because otherwise, how are you going to showcase it to a larger group of people who wouldn't go and seek out an all-women's show, right? But then again, with it being mixed and with men getting that much more time and effort and screen time and favor, right? It's not something that can be sufficient by just doing that. Like, oh, instead of having one women's match on the card, let's have three. You know, that's not going to solve the problem immediately. And that's where the problem lies with people saying that, you know, we should, on like the sports level and the industry level, abolish gendered titles or gendered divisions, because at this point in time, that gender division or title is not a restriction on women. It's something that reserves that spot for the women. Because if we were to abolish titles being gendered, the men will just have all the titles and women will have none of the titles. That's why we need the women's title, right? But ultimately, the long-term goal, yes, would be to definitely abolish the gendered markers, right? But then the all-women's shows are also very important, because this is where they get to, you know, be the star of the show, regardless of what's happening outside of it. And those shows can also become a safe space for, female fans as well. And historically, it's been safer or perceived as safer for women to attend as well. So that's very important for building that community. And we've also seen that non-wrestling shows that are wrestling adjacent and that are just women's have been great for the industry as well. You know, we've seen Total Divas, we've seen Total Bellas, right? And this is something that reared a new generation of wrestling fans and performers. We see a lot of young performers crediting Total Divas with sparking their interest for wrestling. And it was something that was presented in a traditionally palatable for female viewer format. So it felt safer to consume, you know, in a lot of ways socially, because, you know, with wrestling, even for male fans, there's still a stigma of, oh my gosh, you're a nerd, you're watching wrestling, you know. For women, even more so, if you're watching wrestling or any other sport or type of entertainment, that's usually favored by men, you immediately get quizzed on it. You immediately get mansplained. You immediately get alienated. It's, ooh, this girl why is she watching wrestling? Is she trying to impress men? Is she trying to be a pick-me, or, you know, whatever it is, which 99.9% of the time, I promise you, a girl is not pretending to like wrestling. So it's both are important. It's a long-winded answer, but both are important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, you've said that being a woman in wrestling media basically guarantees some level of internet harassment, but that your actual experiences with workers have been mostly positive. How do you keep that from affecting how you show up?
It's a good question, because I think I just simply got lucky with the type of character that I have. But it's also something that made me feel so invested in the issue, because I've had experiences on the internet where I was mostly fine, but it triggered the thought of, if it was someone else in my place who doesn't have that thick skin, they would have been very hurt. It would have been very not okay, and it would have ended badly probably. But I really don't have a specific answer of like how I manage, because I think it's just the years of experience. I think you just develop that thick skin. And again, like you said, unfortunately, it comes with the territory. It doesn't, you know, it shouldn't, but it does. And obviously, that's not just a women's issue. Any kind of man who puts himself out there or non-binary person will also get nitpicked at and harassed to a certain extent. But with women, it just takes that hue of sexual harassment a lot of the time, and it takes that hue of objectification and that hue of dismissiveness and condescension that men don't usually face.
Right.
So it's definitely something, again, that used to be more hurtful than it is now, just because I'm used to it. But it's definitely something that I've been consciously trying to combat, unearth, and showcase, and sometimes even create social consequences without, crossing any lines, but just publicizing whatever a person already said in the open and in the public space, right?
Right.
Just to bring awareness and just to, again, demonstrate those social consequences, because unfortunately, with a lot of social issues that usually don't have legal consequences, social consequences is the only way to combat them. And that's why we talk about how if you're a pro-feminist and if you want to, help women, protect women, your step number one is to call out other men. Right. Because by alienating them from men, not from women, because they don't care about women, by alienating them, not shaking their hand anymore, not inviting them to boys' night anymore,
right,
that's the only real consequence that's going to help this person learn anything. So that's why I feel like it's important to, I've been posting screenshots whenever someone is harassing me, this kind of stuff. Like, it's not for attention, or at least not for attention to me. It's for attention to me. Yeah.
So it's interesting, there seems to be a parallel between the wrestling world and the podcasting world, because we're seeing a lot of the same problems happening there, where you have women that don't feel comfortable speaking to a male podcast because they've had bad experiences, with that kind of thing. So there's this interesting parallel between wrestling and the podcasting world, where it's like that stereotypical view of what a woman should be or what a woman should do. It bleeds right over into, because obviously the podcasting world is huge within the wrestling industry as well. Right. So, that attitude is sort of bleeding over into other things like media and the podcasting world.
Yeah, for sure. And because we have all these tools now and everyone has internet and everyone can afford a basic camera, basic microphone, right? The threshold to enter the space has been really low, right, which as a media professional makes me happy. But that also makes for people trying to do business, essentially, when they have zero feel of any kind of business etiquette or any kind of industry etiquette. And this is something that a lot of female wrestlers face, and I face too, where you would have someone invite you on a podcast, and either before or after they start hitting on you, or the way that they even talk to you is like, like they call you pet names, or they compliment you in the same breath as inviting you on the podcast, which don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with telling a woman she's pretty, but not in the same breath as you're trying to do a business transaction, essentially.
Sure.
And so many people are out of touch when it comes to this kind of stuff. And that's why sometimes if you reach out to a female wrestler to appear, they would have their guard up. And that's not a personal insult, and no one should take it as a personal insult. Right. That's simply them looking out for themselves and their peers and their safety.
Now, stepping away from wrestling for a second, you also cover so many other things on your show, on your channel: food, fashion, travel, alongside wrestling. Do those audiences actually cross over, or are you basically talking to completely different people depending on what you post?
There's a lot of intersection, for sure. And it depends on what it is. With wrestling and travel, there's a lot of intersection, because ultimately people travel for wrestling, Right. And a lot of my travels have been for wrestling. I literally had this conversation with someone recently, because we went on this a weekend trip to Atlanta a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
And I was saying that I can't remember the last time that I traveled somewhere that wasn't for wrestling, because that was for MLW and a local show that Luke Gallows was booking, actually. Then the previous trip to Savannah was for a wrestling adjacent event as well. So I literally, I'm thinking about it, and I can't remember the last time that I've just been let's go on a trip, just not for anything, I mostly travel for wrestling. But then, with some things there's less of an overlap, but I feel like most things that I do have a wrestling overlap. with fashion, I've met a lot of my friends from specifically like wrestling fashion Twitter. People who style wrestling shirts and who put cool outfits together to go to shows. And I'm sure you know there's a big overlap with food as well. There's locations, there's establishments. We actually recently saw the grand opening of Squared Circle Cafe in New York.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm in New York, they're good people, and it's such a cool thing to take on. And I don't know if you guys have heard, probably you have, there's this place called Grill 'Em All in LA, and it's co-owned by two people, and one of them is a wrestling fan and the other is a metal fan.
That's nice.
That's
the
cool.
interior design and the theme of the burgers and names of them is all either wrestling or metal, and they have the Samoa Joe burger, and it's super cool. So maybe it's just that when you get really deep into a community, you start seeing people from that community everywhere. But there's definitely lots of overlap for sure.
So with your YouTube channel specifically, now you have over 66,000 subscribers, and you have what it's telling me is 330 videos. Now, people that put out content would say, maybe they might think, well, that's a huge amount of subscribers, for a small amount of videos. But when you look at it, you've been at that for 7 years. So talk about what a grind it is to make something like a YouTube channel with 66,000 subscribers. What kind of grind that is.
It really is, a job. People think it's just like something fun to do on the side, which it can be, but ultimately, if you're taking it seriously, it's a job. And I also started with YouTube, so I then moved to Instagram. I've had my Twitter for the longest time, probably, or X, is that it's called now?
I call it Twitter still.
We don't call it that here.
No, we don't do. Okay, cool. My people, we don't do that. We call it Twitter. But yeah, I've had my Twitter for probably the longest time to follow my socials. But it was, and it's funny story. I actually made a Twitter account because of WWE, because they had a collaboration with WWE like 15 years ago. So that's how I had my Twitter. But I wasn't, again, building it. I wasn't taken seriously.
Right.
So I started with YouTube, and it's definitely tough to start with YouTube. Like nowadays, unless you have, again, a format and a body and a podcast, right? Unless you have something fleshed out, I don't recommend starting with YouTube because it's very slow to build. It's very slow to even pour other audience into. Like even if you're really big on Instagram or really big on Twitter, it's still tough to transfer that audience over to YouTube. But then on the other hand, it creates some of the more devoted followers. It creates some of the more loyal audiences because they just get to see you so much and sit there and stare at you for such a long time as compared to Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, right? So it builds those really strong connections with your audience. But yeah, it's definitely tough. And for me, it is a small number of videos. And I've taken, I think, like 3 hiatuses at this point from YouTube specifically. I don't think I've taken a break from Instagram longer than like 10, 15 days ever.
Oh, wow.
But with YouTube, I've definitely taken breaks that were like months long because it's a part of the job, again, that it's constant reinventions. And sometimes it's because something that you're doing doesn't work for your audience, or sometimes it's because something that you're doing doesn't work for you anymore. And that's an even tougher internal conversation to have with yourself, right? Because one of the formats that they did for a long time, for like a year, I think, was I would travel to shows and I would do fan interviews. I would interview fans like in the queue before the show.
Cool.
And at first it was really fun. And obviously it's really fun for the people because you love to take part in something bigger and you love to see yourself on the screen after, right? And, it creates this sense of community, which is great. But I think somewhere towards the end of that year, it just kind of spun out of control to where they were so long because I wanted to feature everyone. And like the final video would be like an hour long. And then it would also require for me to come back from the trip and record a sit down at home where I, voice over and talk about where I went and what the questions were and what we're talking about and everything. And it just became so grueling and became a chore.
Right.
And one thing that I'm a big believer in is if you're doing something publicly in media that you're not enjoying, people can immediately tell.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm a social media specialist, but I talk about psychology and anthropology a lot because ultimately we're animals and we're social animals. And
Right.
something that's so deeply wired in the human brain is reading other humans and
Yeah.
reading their emotions and how they feel. So if you're doing something that you're not enjoying, people can very much tell. So that's where I had to pull the brake and be like, hey, I'm not enjoying this anymore. So who's gonna enjoy it if I'm not enjoying it?
Right.
The person who's
Right.
making it. So I had to regroup several times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
and as
I would
a
say-
content creator, I feel like YouTube is probably one of the hardest mediums to work at. Just the time and effort that needs to be put into it, but also the algorithms constantly changing. You know, what analytics are important could change by the day,
Right.
Yeah.
and it's very hard to keep up with.
And in the recent years, with a giant move and trend towards short form videos,
Mhm.
which YouTube accommodates for that too with shorts, and they connect to the main video. So like YouTube is taking care of it, right?
Right.
But it's still, the short format is just so user friendly to create and to consume that it's just drowning out everything else. And that's, again,
Right.
it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just something that you have to be aware of, and something that you have to include in your strategy as a content creator. But yeah, for YouTube, it's definitely something that, again, is the slowest to grow and takes the most effort to produce and takes the most skill to produce. Because even with, short form TikTok or Instagram, or now they have the Edits app, which is absolutely brilliant, by the way, big fan of that app. It's just so user friendly and it's so easy to use editing tools that 5-10 years ago were only available to you if you had a certain skill set.
Right.
And I was never the best or biggest editor. In the last, I want to say 3-4 years, I've had an editor that I've been working with consistently. I can't remember the last time I sat down and edited a long form video myself. But it was something that I learned to do for YouTube, and there was no way around that, So it's definitely a tough type of media to grow.
Now, speaking of media presence, you also coach other wrestling professionals on building their media presence. So what's maybe the most common mistake you see talent making when it comes to their brand online?
Yeah, so this is like the main thing that I've been doing recently, and it's been great and so rewarding because I feel like in my years on social media and in wrestling specifically, I've accumulated so much knowledge that I just feel this physical need almost to pass it on. But in terms of misconceptions, on my passes, my platform that I use, I even have like a whole webinar about misconceptions about social media. But I think the two main ones is people think it's quick and simple. Like the most common question people come to me with is, okay, tell me what to post. And I have to be like, no, let's rewind and let's start at the beginning and let's talk about who you are and what you're doing and who's your target audience and where you're based and what's your goal. It's not that simple. Like even depending on your goal, again, like if you want to get signed, for example, by WWE or AEW, even then you would be creating different content,
Right.
So the question of tell me what to post is never that easy and fast. And another one is that it's difficult and that it's a step out of their comfort zone, which I am understanding of that. But I always tell wrestlers, if you can cut a promo, you can make content.
Right.
Like wrestlers are inherently content creators.
Yeah.
Wrestlers have something that brands and creators and bloggers search for and have to build and have to have meetings and emails about. Wrestlers have them built in where they have their character. They are archetyped. They are already there. So what's left is to just turn the camera on, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's one misconception that, oh my God, I have to change my life so much and I have to come up with something that's never existed before. No, you already have it in you.
So as far as professional wrestling goes, or professional wrestlers being content creators, things like that, what is maybe one piece of advice that you can give them? Let's say a pro wrestler does not understand that they're a brand and does not understand that they need to market themselves as a brand. What is one piece of advice you would give them to get started in all of this?
I have those two questions that I usually ask when we try to figure out the branding, and especially when we try to figure out like a bio description or something like that. You can ask yourself one of the two questions or both. What do I do that no one else in my industry does?
Okay.
Or what do I do best? in the world? What is something that they do best? And with wrestling, it's even better because no one's gonna fact check you. Because
Right.
you can say you're a dinosaur. No one's gonna question you on that. So if you have the answer to at least one of those questions, this is where your brand starts. Like this is that very root to your whole entire presentation. So that's very helpful to sit down and think about.
Now, you also have a cooking series, as I mentioned before, which I think needs to be addressed. So, real quick, what is the signature dish? What are you actually proud of making?
Oh my god, I'm a big like food fan, like, and not just cooking, eating as well. And it's something that I experience culture through food. I think like when I travel,
Absolutely,
unfathomable to me to not like try everything.
Right.
In terms of cooking, out of the stuff that I have on the channel, I think the Russian salad, because it's something that's just so much sentiment is attached to, because it's something that I grew up eating like on New Year's Eve and during holidays. And so my mom taught me how to make, and we would make it together in the morning of like New Year's Eve day. So it's definitely something that I really love. And it's funny because it's like this cultural limitation of like, I'm only allowed to make this during the holidays.
Right.
Like I'm really craving it, but I can't have it right now. It has to be a holiday. But yeah, probably that. But it was a really enjoyable series to make. I kind of, put a hold on it because I was just busier with other stuff. It's not because I didn't enjoy it. I very much did enjoy it. But it's funny because I also did get some hate on this series as well.
Oh no!
Because when I made the nachos, which again I never claimed to be the most skilled and culturally sensitive nacho maker.
Sure.
But people were very upset about my guacamole for some reason.
Oh no!
But I've learned the lesson, and take my word for it, I've improved my guacamole since.
Oh my!
For those who don't know, what is a Russian salad?
So it's kind of like, it's not really a salad. So those like Minnesota salads that aren't really salads. It's just kind of like stuff suspended in mayo. Like it's
right.
Russians freaking love mayo. Like we love our mayo.
Okay.
Mayo is the reason for the season. If you're having a holiday dinner, there would be like 9 salads and 5 of them taste like mayo.
You have just listen. You have just this interview's over. I don't know how to. Listen. I'm not a mayo eater, and one of my pet peeves is all these things that we call salads that have nothing to do with being a salad. Like
it's mayo.
It drives me insane that we call all these things salads. Like, and I thought that was just like an American thing. I didn't know that like they do that everywhere.
That's Slavic people too, and Balkan people too.
Yeah.
But that opens the floor to a philosophical discussion of what defines a salad,
Right, exactly.
Yes. Well, listen,
it's what defines a salad, and also it's what is a sandwich.
What is a sandwich? That we've had serious debates about that on the show with wrestlers. That has become. I actually
saw like discourse that every single food is either a soup or a sandwich.
Yeah. So we had on a wrestler named David Moses on our show, and David Moses, when we asked him a question, he said a burrito's a sandwich. He said a taco's a sandwich. He said, I'm like, all these things, a hot dog's a sandwich. I'm like, there has to be some sort of qualifications about what is a sandwich.
Anything that's on top of or between dough is a sandwich.
There you go. See, there you go.
Wow. I'm still blown away by everything being either a soup or a sandwich. Like now I'm gonna think about that all the time now. Like anytime I'm near food.
I ruined your life. I'm sorry.
No. I like thinking about food. That's not. It's just now I'm gonna think about that all the time.
That could also go in the real world too, because it's been a debate that the ocean is a soup. Because it qualifies as a soup. If you think about it, all the ingredients are there. The ocean is a soup.
Yeah. Actually, recently had a very heated debate with someone about whether soup is a beverage.
Oh, okay.
I'm a firm believer that soup is a food. If you're managing solids, it's a food. You could argue bubble tea.
Right.
However, you're not going to spoon bubble tea in your mouth. Like if you soup is flat, beverage is tall.
Wow. This is wow. I like my mind is just being expanded here thinking about these things. Wow. Incredible. So over the years, talking to people, just being a fan of wrestling. You mentioned earlier that you grew up mainly in Russia and Spain. So how did you come to wrestling over there, and how did you get turned on to like the American wrestling?
I accidentally found wrestling, and it started with American wrestling.
Okay.
I was actually in London with my mom because she's a designer and she had work in London. She was designing a trophy for a fashion competition, actually.
Okay.
And I was 11 years old, and I was in the hotel room flipping through the channels, and I stumbled upon SmackDown. And
Nice.
the rest is history. And it's funny because, being a child at the time, I barely even spoke English. I didn't even know what was happening. So if anyone wants to argue that it's the promos that get your casual viewer, lies. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, that's funny.
But I've done wrestling adjacent things in every country that I've lived in. I've done wrestling stuff in Russia. I started working in wrestling in Russia, where that first ever interview happened, and before then I started making content. I started very much as a classic YouTuber. I had unboxings, reactions, vlogs, this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And I've done wrestling stuff in Spain as well. I've done interviews, backstage interviews. I've managed a tag team in a Barcelona promotion. I've done wrestling things in Romania, even. I am part Romanian. And I actually made, pretty early into my YouTube days, I made a mini documentary about wrestling in Romania.
Oh, wow.
And the kicker is that there was nearly none. There was one singular wrestling school that had under 10 students.
Wow.
And we only managed to get one for the shoot.
No, wow.
And the guy who founded the school, and he's not even Romanian, I think he was Scottish, and he drove over the border and brought a wrestling ring in a truck to Romania, and built a wrestling school under his own apartment that he lived in.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And now they have full-blown wrestling shows, and they fly people out from America and everything. But at the time, there was nearly nothing. And it was just so fascinating to see, how this whole scene is only just budding. And for America, it's just something unfathomable. For me, as a Russian, it's less mind-blowing because, for example, I know you guys are probably familiar. So NWA's Natalia Markova.
Yes.
Fun fact is she was the first female wrestler in Russia.
Wow.
Not one of the first, the first.
Wow. Yeah.
And she's still very much active in her prime and young, you know? So that's how young the industry is in Russia. The Russian wrestling scene is younger than I am. So again, for me as a Russian, Romania having close to none was less of a culture shock, but I feel for my American viewers, it was very much a culture shock.
I'm sure.
Now, you do commentary in 2 languages and backstage interviews in 3. Does your personality actually change depending on which language you're working in?
Does my what change? You're cutting out, sorry.
Does your personality change?
Oh, okay. Ooh, I don't think I've ever thought about that, but honestly, I think yes. Not as much between Russian and English because I'm basically bilingual. But with Spanish, yeah, because my Spanish is not as good as my English. And I think that comes with more nerves. That comes with more agitation. And I only recently started doing things in Spanish, but it's been great. But when you first start, that was very nerve-wracking. It felt like I was doing my first interview all over again, And my first interview was in Spanish was actually Carlos Romo. Who's a very good friend of mine, and he was actually Axiom's original tag team partner.
Oh, wow.
And him and Axiom were the first professional wrestlers in Spain who actually travel and were wrestling abroad and everything. And I actually met him in Texas during Mania Week, not even in Spain. But he was my first ever interview in Spanish. I was working with that promotion in Madrid called WAW, and he wrestled there. And I made sure to have him as my first interview because he's my friend, and I would be less scared to screw up. But the bloopers from those first Spanish interviews are something because there were so many pauses and looking at the notes. And then I don't know if you guys know Sarah Leon. She's actually based here in Orlando now.
Oh yeah.
It was one of my first Spanish interviews as well in Spain.
That's very cool. Wow.
Very cool.
And there's like outtakes from that interview where I'm like, I'm sorry, look at the notes. And she's like patting me on the shoulder with such sympathy on her face. But yeah, we got through it, and it was getting better and better with time. And I think I'm somewhat confident interviewing in Spanish now.
It's also interesting to me that your first interview was Ultraman is Black, because we're very familiar with him. We've talked to him before, but I'm interested in your knowledge of Chikara and how did you find Chikara? What did you think when you found Chikara? Because it's a whole nother world.
It is.
Yeah, I don't have very much knowledge of Chikara. I think I found it because of Ultraman is Black. I found it preparing for that interview. That was my first contact with Chikara.
Right.
And that's where I did some research, and I watched some clips and everything. And then a little later, I became a really big fan of Best Friends, the tag team that doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, yes.
AKA Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta. And Trent is to this day one of my absolute favorite wrestlers.
Yes.
Those guys are great.
That's where more clips came and more lore. But I really don't have much knowledge of Chikara. Like, all I have is regret that I couldn't see it in real life.
Right.
And I know that it kind of, went down in flames when it did come to its end, unfortunately. But at the time, it was definitely something that largely formed the wrestling scene in that area. And it's something that still, we still see the fruits of, a lot of the people that we love and know who are on AEW now, for example, or they're people from Chikara. So it's definitely a very important page in the wrestling history.
And we have a spiritual successor to Chikara now in Philadelphia. Power Pro Lucha is a company that is run by two former Chikara wrestlers, and they've brought in a lot of the Chikara fold, and they're trying to bring back what Chikara represented, but in a much better light. It's that we hear them all the time talk about inclusion and how any sort of intolerance to anyone of anybody there, any intolerance will not be tolerated, and you will be gone immediately. Like they're trying to do it the right way now.
It's amazing. I love that.
Now you sort of mentioned it before, but by saying one of your wrestlers, but I want to hear, as a format for Opinion City, we usually do top 5. So real quick, give us your top 5 favorite wrestlers, list them and defend them. Let's hear it.
List them and defend them. Oh boy.
Defend them, yeah. I feel like with my choices, I do have to defend them.
Okay.
Do they have to be in order or no?
No. You can just like your 5 favorite wrestlers.
Yeah.
One of them we'd already mentioned, Trent Beretta.
Beretta, yes.
My defense is that he's literally the most underrated wrestler ever.
We love Trent.
100%.
Has everything, has the look, has the in-ring, is super funny, can cut promos, and just never really, got a chance at the main titles on TV or anywhere, right? And obviously, I was a big fan of Best Friends, and it was the sad day when they broke up and, Chuck eventually retired. But Trent is carrying on the legacy, and I've been a fan of his since WWE. And part of it is that he was a part of the very first WWE YouTube show, through Long Island Story. And that was something that, again, is such a historic piece of wrestling media because it triggered the phenomenon of wrestling YouTube shows. It was quite literally the very first one. So, that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart as a YouTuber in wrestling. And actually, my interview with Trent and Chuck is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. And it's actually also the only interview that's recorded inside of Daly's place, which was very special to me. Yeah. When we talk about, again, the wildest stuff, we talk about like Russian deathmatch wrestling in that interview. But okay, that's one.
That's one.
2, Taya Valkyrie.
Nice. Yeah.
That's my favorite. And also I've loved her like ever since I discovered her many years ago. Couldn't even tell you how many years, and through all her iterations. And again, I just think it's such an unusual style or a fusion of styles because she trained in Mexico and wrestled in Mexico. And if you can, as a white girl from Canada, gain the respect of Mexican luchadors, that tells you something.
Yeah, that's big.
And it's awesome to see her in AEW and RH and awesome to me because I get to see her work because I go to those shows.
Yeah.
But she's absolutely amazing. Love her so much. Then let's go Nick Nemeth.
Oh,
Nick
nice.
Nemeth, okay,
Yeah.
great
Another
choice. Great choice.
All-time favorite. Like from day one that I started watching wrestling, he was a favorite. And I actually interviewed him twice as well.
Nice.
And that first interview that we did was fully about comedy. It was not about wrestling at all. It was before his comedy show in Vegas, actually, some years ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
it was our first time meeting each other in real life after like having talked about it on social media for a super long time. I was like, we need to do an interview. We need to do an interview. And then the years come fast, you know. And he's just so delightful to work with. He's like the most professional person I've ever met. Like it doesn't matter whether he's tired or in a hurry or had a bad day. The way he snaps into it the second the camera is on is just absolutely incredible, and what every on-camera professional should strive to be. And you know, just an outstanding wrestler. And him post his WWE release, doing New Japan and doing TNA and having literally the best matches of his career made me love him and respect him even more. Because upon the news of his release, I, again, with no negativity at all, just as a matter of fact, I was like, I think he's not going to wrestle anymore because he does so many other things. You know, he does comedy, he does his political TV show appearances, he does acting, he does so many things that at this point and at his age, like he doesn't need to wrestle. And I feel like a lot of people who come out of long WWE runs are so uninspired when it comes to wrestling because especially if they haven't been booked properly, if they haven't had many matches recently, if you know they've been made to do repetitive things for many years. For a lot of people, it kills their drive, it kills their passion for wrestling, and you can't blame them for that at all. No. But for him to rediscover it in such a glorious way made me, you know, admire him even more so.
Yeah, and I don't
like the best sellers out there. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, he's literally like I've been saying it since he first became Dolph Ziggler in WWE. Like he knows how to sell any move and make it look like death every time.
Yeah, ragdoll.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I don't think he's underrated. I think he's underutilized because any wrestler that has been in the ring with Nick Nemeth will tell you how good he is.
Yeah. And I was actually there for his Money in the Bank cash-in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so another very special moment. But yeah, that's 3. Next, I have to say The Miz.
The Miz.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
absolutely. The Miz is...
We love The Miz in this household.
Yeah, The Miz is
I think he was my first legitimate, like, favorite wrestler.
Oh, yeah?
And I think it's because of the showmanship. I think it's because of how great he is with the camera and the microphone. And I don't claim him to be a freaking Kenny Omega in the ring, right? But he doesn't have to be. Oh. And that just more so shows you that in wrestling, there's room for everyone. There's room for different people who manifest in different ways. And with Miz, I've also had a lot of cool moments where my first ever live encounter with wrestling, before I went to any shows or meet and greets or cons or anything, was the Miz meet and greet in Moscow, Russia in 2012.
Wow.
And by the time I'd been a wrestling fan for a while, but I just never been to any shows because, you know, I was living in Russia, so no American shows. And then I really wasn't like quite aware of the local scene until I started making content. Like I knew it existed, like I'd heard, but I just, you know, as a child, preteen or teen, I didn't know like what to do with that information, didn't know where to find it, you know. So that meet and greet was my first ever live contact with wrestling, and it was a meet and greet with my favorite wrestler ever. I was freaking out. Like when I saw the post about it, I like collapsed and cried of happiness. Like very dramatic, like a Disney princess just on the couch. And when I showed up to that meet and greet, oh my God, it was insanity. It was like a giant mall, right? And the booth with the table was like pretty much like smack dab in the middle of the atrium. And it was just a sea of people as far as you could see.
Wow.
Like to the doors and outside the doors. And I think that was the most crowded meet and greet to this day that I'd ever seen in my entire life. So I was there super early, so you know I had to make sure that I was able to meet him. But yeah, I think he thought that was weird because I was like on the verge of tears the whole time. But funny thing is, I've only met him twice ever, and the next time after that was 10 years later, almost to the day.
Oh wow.
So I told him about the Russia thing, and like we talked a little bit about his Russia trip, which like it was March, I think March 2012, because it was right before WrestleMania. And in Moscow, Russia, in March, it is cold. It's winter essentially. Like there's snow, right? And I guess he didn't realize because that mall had like not shorts, but like a suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And that mall had like a graffiti wall because they would have meet and greets and events all the time. So they would, for every celebrity, they would prepare like a graffiti wall that had to do with them or what they do, and have them sign it with like the little spray paint before the meet and greet. And the pictures from that signing, he's wearing a suit and he's like definitely shivering. And his translator is this stereotypical Russian woman, like not older but like middle-aged, in this giant fur coat and a giant fur hat, and he's wearing only a suit. And I think he went to the Red Square in that same suit too, and nothing else. Because WWE were like, your PR program is right here. You're not getting out of it. So he go to the Red Square. But yeah, it was super cool. Super cool.
And,
first meeting.
And let's not forget, for all the stuff they're doing with The Miz still holds a main event WrestleMania world title win over John Cena.
Yep.
And that is incredible to think about. Like that night was amazing. The video package they did before the match for him, it was just everything was so perfect because you know that he really appreciated all of that because he worked so hard to get there. And I don't think you see that in a lot of other wrestlers where you can tell every moment they have is important because they worked so hard to get there.
He's also the first two-time Grand Slam champion.
Yes.
Yeah. He's got quite the resume.
I still have my number 5 to pick.
Number 5, here we go.
Oh my god, why is it so hard? Let's say Beth Phoenix.
Phoenix,
oh, nice.
Right.
That's a good call.
She was also one of my first favorite wrestlers ever. And at the time, the Diva era, she was just so different. And that fascinated me so much that and again, nothing wrong with being pretty and sexy and everything else, right?
Sure.
But she was just so different, and she was strong and fierce, and she could stand up to men, and it was something that the child me was like, oh my god, this is the coolest woman ever. And I still think she's the coolest woman ever, I think.
That's amazing. All right, well, that's a great top 5.
I was just going back to Miz for just a second. I do feel a little bit bad that he doesn't remember most of that main event because he got a concussion early on. So yeah, it was a huge win for him, but unfortunately, he doesn't remember almost all of it. So it's kind of
well, yes, these things happen, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so tell us a little bit about XDT Media and scanning over that website and everything that you do there for services that you offer for people. It's unbelievable. There's so much there in terms of resources, and so just tell us a little bit about maybe what you do for clients, what you do for wrestling clients, because obviously you have a lot of information on there for wrestlers that need to understand how to work all of this.
Yeah, like you said, all the information can be found at xdtmedia.com. There's everything there. There's a video, there's descriptions of packages, there's all the information that you can possibly want or need. And the links are in my bio on Instagram and on Twitter as well. But to put it simply, I call it strategic media development or guidance, depending on how you want to interact with me. So it starts with really small packages that are only informational resources where you can subscribe and you can get webinars, you can get PDFs and just kind of learn it on your own. And then there's packages that include live sessions. So they can be either group sessions or it can be one-on-one sessions. And this is me coming into your life every week and teaching you things. But then the higher check packages are my personal guidance for you. So we look specifically at your goals, specifically at where you're at, what you want to achieve, and we lead you through it. So I'm not a social media manager. I'm not the person who's just going to get pictures from you and post them for you. I'm a big believer in you as a business owner or a self-employed person understanding how the system works. And that's not because I'm lazy and I don't want to do stuff for you, even though I don't want to do stuff for you because I can do better things with my time. But it's because I believe that in the modern context with social media, you have to be able to do it yourself. Even if you don't do it yourself the whole time or the whole span of your career. And even if you do get a social media manager, which even if you do have a social media manager, we can work with that as well. And it's even easier and better for me.
Right.
But you have to understand how to do it yourself in case there's something time sensitive, in case there's something that you want to post, but it, it is not on the list of your post for the week or
Right.
for the person who does it for you. You should be able to do it yourself, but also should be able to tell good from bad. Because I have so many clients coming to me who have social media managers, and it's either this situation of they have this beautiful Instagram that's completely pointless and doesn't lead anywhere. Like it looks great, but
Right.
there's zero calls to action. There's zero things to buy. There's zero like triggers for people to follow you or stick around or to wait around for, right?
Right.
It looks good, but there's no substance to it. Or they delegate it to someone and it's just downright bad. Like it's poor quality, it's, AI slop. I see a lot of that. And they can't tell, like they don't know that it's bad because this person came to them and told them that, oh, you should do this. And they were like, okay, I guess, because they don't know how that works. So my mission is to guide a person or a company through it, teach them, and eventually to let them out into the world on their own.
Yes.
So I'm not the kind of person who's gonna release them, who's gonna sit there and squeeze every last dollar out of you just because I want you to stick around. My goal is to teach you and let you do it on your own. And if you do need my support still, that's still possible. And if you do want to level up or upgrade to a bigger package or have more of my hours a week or have more of my involvement or even have me make content for you, that is also possible. So it's very turnkey, like you said, just like my interviews, it's very tailored to your needs as a professional.
All right. Well, it has been great getting to learn a little bit more about you, your incredible life, everything that you're out there doing, your upbringing, and all the your wrestling history, your fandom, and everything else. But I think it's really important what you do, specifically for wrestlers, because we brought this up during the interview, but wrestling 7 years ago for a wrestler was different than it is now. Like 7 years ago when you started. Now wrestlers, they have to treat themselves as a brand. They have to understand how social media works, how, like you said, how to direct to other things, how to, there's so much more for professional wrestlers to understand, especially the indie wrestlers, because they're not working for a specific company. They're out there selling themselves, who they are and what they do, and they have to be good at that. And for you to be a person who, again, you have a degree in media, and you understand what it is that they need to do. You understand how to get them where they need to be, and I think that's a really important service. And if wrestlers don't know about it, I think that's a real shame. They should. Yes, this is something that all wrestlers should know about, because if they don't understand these things, there's help out there, and there's someone like you to get them on the right track. So I think what you do is very important for the wrestling business, and what you do as far as your inclusion advocacy for both women and all of the different genres that are stereotyped in a certain way and don't get that same inclusion as men do. You are an advocate for that, and I think that's very important work that you do as well. So I applaud what you do, because it's especially for indie wrestlers who are our bread and butter. We cover indies, we talk to indie wrestlers. It is so important for them to understand how to market themselves, and the fact that you do that, you offer those services, it's just you're doing the Lord's work.
Thank you so much for your kind words. And ultimately my mission, I think, just as a person in this world, is to leave wrestling better than I found it. And I feel like it's, it would resonate with a lot of people. But you're so right that, and especially for indie wrestlers, and especially for wrestlers who have been signed to a bigger company and now they're not anymore, this is the time to do it. This is the time to start, because you're your own boss, you're your own team, like you said, and no one is going to do it but you. So, like, the Chinese proverb that goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best
Oh,
time is right now.
Yes.
You know?
love it. I love it. Well, that's amazing. You can see we've had the links running underneath the screen, so definitely check those out for everywhere that you can find Xenia online and everything that she's doing. I will have links down in the description as well. And if you are an independent professional wrestler, and believe me, we will be recommending you to people that we see all the time, because there are a lot of people that could use this help. But if you are an independent wrestler, if you are a wrestler of any level and you need that help, definitely seek out Xenia, because she has the tools and resources to help you get where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this has been great. Again, getting to learn all about what you do, and so thankful for your time today. It's been great having you on the episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And this is a great showcase of a well-researched interview.
Yeah.
You guys did a great job, and as a fellow interviewer, I can appreciate that. So thank you for that.
There you go.
It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Wrestling is Life. For Xeniadidthat, for Parma Sean, I'm King Ralph, and remember, kindness is free, so be kind to each other. God bless each and every one of you, and we will see you on the next episode of Wrestling with Life.